How many times have you started something you were doing so well? Maybe it was your diet. Maybe you started exercising and you felt great in that moment. You're like, I'm going to do this forever. And think about your current circumstances now. Are you still doing that thing that was super good for you? Are you still eating clean like you were that one time? Or has it vanished? Has it stopped? And how did it stop? You were doing so well. It was working so well for your body, your mind. You enjoyed it. You had your habits. Maybe you bought different kinds of foods. Your spending habits changed where you were more disciplined. But now spending's out of control and you're eating just junk again. How did it get in your pantry? How did that snack get in there? You know you don't want to eat it, but it's in there. This is a symptom of falling off the wagon. And today we're talking all things about how to counterbalance that when it happens, because it always does. And the moments, the days in between you falling off the wagon of the way you want to be, how you want to be that way, that's the key on how you respond. It's going to happen. So how can you get yourself back to where you want to go? And once you get that superpower, you can have confidence in yourself that no matter what, you are going to do the things that are good for you, that are going to take you to where you want to go. So by the end of this, you are going to have some key action steps that will 100% keep you going in the direction you want to go, get you back to where you once were. So if it's been months, weeks, maybe years since you have done the things that you want to do, the things you know you need to do, this is the one that's going to help you keep on doing it. Let's jump in, Sean. What do you say to that? You ever fallen off the wagon before?
Never. It's always been rainbows and sunshines. Absolutely. I'm an imperfect human being just like you. And I know we both have. I think we all fall off the wagon. And one of the things that I've learned in 30 plus years of my life is it's about how you respond when you do fall off the wagon. And so unfortunately, I learned this the hard way where I was very reactive in how I dealt with stress, anxiety, and I tended to overspend, right? Overeat. I eat pizzas on Sundays, shared this on other episodes, overspent on cars that I didn't necessarily need, luxury cars, Shelby Mustangs. And then I would have disagreements with loved ones. I would be a little bit more short because I was fatigued or I was tired. And so I started noticing a trend that I was falling off multiple bandwagons, not just one, but multiple wagons in these different areas of life. And it wasn't just for an hour. It wasn't just for a day. It started turning into days. And so one of the things when I went through this transformational journey, I learned really quickly, it's how you respond in those moments when you overeat, when you overspend, when you have a disagreement with the loved one. And like you said in the intro, we've got 8 baby steps that we're going to be going over today, that we're going to be diving deep on. And we're going to share an action step in each one of these that's helped us get to the next step. Make sure you stay tuned to the end because this 8th step I would consider, and I think Ewan can agree with this, is the most important step. The 8th step, we're going to be sharing that here shortly.
If we didn't go over the other 7 or whatever 7 we're about to go over, they're all key elements to get into where you need to go. But if the number 1, if you just had that, everything else falls into place. So yeah, man,
Agreed.
start us off. Hit us with that first one.
So the first one I would say that I have learned is acknowledge it. Don't dwell on it. So when you know you've overeaten, when you know you've overspent, and you know you've had a disagreement with a loved one, acknowledge it. Don't dwell on it. I think too many times, myself included, where I would just dwell on it, I would just sit in my thoughts and just basically not share it with anybody, not get my emotions out, not share my feelings, and I would just dwell on it. And so an action step that I have learned, instead of beating myself up, I recognize that, hey, I'm an imperfect human being. I'm God's child. I'm going to have setbacks. I'm going to have challenges. And this is a part of the journey and who I'm wanting to become, which is 1% better in these different areas of life than I was yesterday. Yep. And so for an example, some example might look like, hey, I made a mistake, but I'm ready to move forward. I swallowed
Mhm.
my pride. I swallowed my ego. I made a mistake. I dropped the ball, but I'm ready to move forward. Right there, I just got a lift off my shoulders.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what's kind of been a situation for you? And if I was to think about candy is like the number one thing I could not stop. I could not stop eating candy. And I knew it was bad for me. I would even teach my kids, say, don't eat sugar because this is why it's not good. And I go for a
Mm,
week, 2 weeks doing really well. And then all of a sudden I'm eating Mike and Ike's again. How did that happen? I don't want to, and I'm still doing it. And if I was to check in with the emotions, the it's the opposite of acknowledging. It's like I literally turn a blind eye
mm,
unconsciously. I don't want to look at it because then I'd have to face the shame,
yep.
the guilt, and I'd also have to change the habits and stop the dopamine replacement hit that you get from enjoying that thing short term. And so I think once you acknowledge it, you kind of stop that dead in its tracks. You stop that mindless grabbing for the thing that you want because now it's out in the open, and you're going to have a harder conversation with yourself. And it's very easy to slip back into, I'm just going to turn a blind eye and not do it. But that is sabotage. The longer you keep the blind eye going, the farther down this horrible path that you're going. Uh, and for light at the end of the tunnel, there, as soon as you stop, you're then going the other direction, back to where you want to go. And
Mm,
that can happen anytime. And I think a lot of people, myself included, if I was to analyze myself, when you go down that path, it feels impossible. It
mm.
feels like it's going to be so long to get back to where you need to go that it actually makes you turn another blind eye. And
Yeah.
so I think once people can start resonating with, I can stop that now and get back to where I want to go very quickly, and doing that repeatedly over and over, you build this identity of, oh, I can get back on track quick. And then you have confidence. And to me, once you have that, you almost stop doing the thing that it was that you were once doing because you can control it.
Yeah, I recently acknowledged in one of the businesses our leadership team meeting. We had a meeting here recently, and one of the things that I get super. I'm a problem solver, and especially with instances that other people can't solve, and we've coached them through that. And so we were working through something. Well, that's typically where I shine in my place, and I get really excited. But I do this a lot with a lot of people. And it's one of the things that I'm working on that I struggle with is I tend to cut people off.
Mm,
I feel like a Gary
mm.
Vaynerchuk where I just cut people off, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I do that with a lot with you. And so if I do, I need you to put me in my place and say, hey,
I do it
man.
right back to you, just like I did right now.
So this happened recently with one of my team members, one of the people that I respect that's been with me for several years. And I called her after our leadership meeting. I said, hey, I just want to acknowledge this. I feel like there's some tension, and I just want to acknowledge, what had happened. And she had she had opened up, brought it to my attention, said, hey, this is how you made me feel. And it was that instance where I cut her off,
Mm,
because, um, and so I acknowledged that. I apologized for it. It was my mistake, but hey, what can we do moving forward? That's something that I can work on. So I think that's
right.
baby step number one is acknowledge it. Don't dwell on it, because if I normally in the past, I would have dwelled on that and it would have subconsciously pulled my piece because I knew I
Yeah.
needed to make that hard conversation call to this person that's in my life, that's in my business. And so I was able to acknowledge it, and then we were able to move past it within a matter of minutes.
Man, it's no small thing that you did there, man. Like that is spectacular because it's very hard to do that. It's a perfect one where you could just turn a blind eye. It'll be fine. We'll work it out. It'll
Yep.
smooth itself out over time. It's going to happen again without the acknowledgement
Yep.
because it was accepted this first time. It wasn't addressed, and then she's also going to have resentment towards you. And the complete reverse, 180, is this: what boss comes, what leader comes and apologizes? Just that alone, like that essence of your intention, what a game changer. That person, you wouldn't even need to say anything else other than the fact that you talked to her and said, hey, my apologies. That speaks volumes, right? Like, and we're dancing around like food, conversations, relationship with people, spending money. It's all the same thing. It's the
Yeah.
same habits, same patterns. We are predictive beings, and so what you do in one place is what you do in another. Said it a million times, but Yeah, I think that's really brilliant, man.
Going into the second step is the baby step number 2, which is pause and reflect. So that's exactly what I did after having that conversation. And I took a deep breath. We have some breath work has just been a game changer for me. And
Mm,
we've talked about this behind the scenes. There's this release, this 3 to 4 minute release breath framework that I use in practice. And so I took a moment, and this is the second step is pause and reflect. And I asked myself why it happened. And
mm,
so for us, in like one of the businesses, we're experiencing high stress, high overwhelm in the insurance market, which is a hard market. And so I was able to reflect on that. We were able to have a conversation on that, on how it led to where it was at. And so when we acknowledged, oh, everybody's stressed, like, we're human beings, and acknowledging that and reflecting on that, it allowed us to put a pulse on it, and then remove ourselves from that scenario, that feeling, that emotion, and have a mature adult conversation about it. And so
how did it all feel when you were doing that?
It's uncomfortable. We talk about getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. I mean, I
Yeah,
talk about that every day. And that's exactly what I preach, is what I actually do in my own life.
yeah, you
So,
do.
I mean, it's not just cold plunges, running ultras, running marathons, doing competitions. I apply that same thing in all areas of life. And that's as simple as having a hard conversation with somebody on the leadership team or an employee or team member. And so it's getting comfortable, getting uncomfortable. And 9 times out of 10, most people are not having those conversations. Like you said, they're taking a blind eye to it, whether that's
Mhm.
food, whether that's, an issue in your marriage, or whether that's an issue at the business. And for me, like in that situation, I needed to pause. I had 2 forks in the road. Which road did I want to go down? I've done the blind eye. That's not the version of the leader that I want to become. I want to be this other guy, which one's going to be more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The person that's going to have the conversation right now, and be aware and reflect on his feelings because of, you know, the stress and everything that's going on right now.
It was like we did an episode a week or two ago about that thing you don't want to do. That's exactly what you need to do. So when it feels uncomfortable, like you're saying there, it's uncomfortable to have those conversations. Most people, or if you're not familiar or used to doing it, well, I'm not going to then, because it's going to be awkward. It's going to be weird. Don't want to. And as soon as you feel that feeling, it's not a bad thing. It's the people run away from the anxiety and fear of those difficult conversations. It's actually, you can use it to your advantage. It's a beacon. It is a lighthouse of, oh, that's going to be hard.
Mm.
That's what I need to go do. Once you start training your brain to do that, man, you start doing all those things and things get resolved. I was going to say, if you're on your own and it's a conversation with yourself about something that you've fallen off the wagon on, writing it down, asking yourself the question. Literally, most people won't do this because I know it's who takes the time to grab a pen, grab some paper, and write for 60 seconds or 2 minutes. I know it's hard for me, but when I do, especially when it's something difficult, there's a lot of overwhelm going on in the mind. You got to get that out onto paper, because once it's out of your mind and on a paper, it becomes more tangible. And if you ask yourself the question, why am I doing this? Like, I would say to myself, Ewan, you are currently doing this. Why are you doing that? I would write it out. And I'd say, well, if I was to be honest, I'm doing it because of, I'd write something out. And right about that moment, normally I'll find out that's not actually the real reason. I'll say, that's not right. Or I'll say, that's a that's a canned response. And then I'll ask myself again, what's the real reason? And I'll write this out. And I'm like, it's because I'm afraid. It's because I'm not aware. It's because I'm emotionally soothing myself with food, or I don't feel like I'm going to be productive, or I'm going to look embarrassed. And so I've written this out. And then once it's out, I can ask myself, okay, is that true? Is it 100% true? And then I can take action steps to getting around whatever it is that's been keeping me back. And that works almost every time. In fact, I don't know if there's ever a time I've written it out. The only thing holding me back from making something happen out of that is when I don't write it down. That's just me personally. That might not work for everyone, but I'd say that's one of my strongest. I tell my daughter, my son, you're worried, fearful about something. Go write it down, have a conversation with yourself. And they always
Hmm.
come back and be like, it wasn't that big a deal. It's a monster in the brain. It's just a
Yeah.
speed bump on paper.
Yeah. Number 3, baby step, make a micro course correction. So once you do the first 2, you can make a micro course correction. And so an action step might be just take one small step to get back on track. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. And so for me, like in the scenario that I gave, the story that I shared, it was one small step. I'm going to make a phone call to this person. I'm going to call their cell phone to on the and address this once I've paused and reflect. In fitness, if I skip a workout, which I've gotten better over time, then I'll commit to a 10-minute walk or a 30-minute walk with my dogs. If it's something to do with finances or wealth, if I've overspent, like a couple of years ago, if I overspent on something big, typically I'm pretty good about my finances, but in that, I don't know what I was going through that 3 months when I bought that Shelby Mustang, I had to really reflect on that. And so I had to basically plan a no spend. My note says day, but I really needed to plan a no spend, few months and, and, and figure out. And I ended up, flipping it and selling it. And so, but the only reason I was able to get to that is because I paused and reflect. And then I
Yeah.
made a micro course correction, which is that
Yes.
third step with that Shelby Mustang. And then in relationships, for me, a big one is because I'm a strong personality, type of individual. So if I tend to, my tone is a little louder than normal, or I'm speaking out of kindness to somebody that maybe doesn't know me, and I'm just speaking out of love, but they don't know that because that's my love language. That's how I speak. Then I try my best to apologize sincerely and genuinely. And for me, I try to set aside time to talk. So making those little small micro course corrections are a game changer, not only for that other person, but for you subconsciously.
Yeah, it's amazing how all these things, these different points, stem into each other. Uh, and if people are not used to doing this, it's gonna be a disaster. But the key is to continue to acknowledge, continue to pause and reflect, and continue, because here it comes, is the micro changes, right? That micro step of what you can do different this next time. So if you're hot on a diet and you're crushing it, you're 90 out of 100, and then you fall off the wagon, you're back down to a 10. The faster you can get back into getting back to the good habits that got you to the 90, next time you fall off the wagon, and you will, because we all have, you'll be an 11 next time you drop back.
Yeah.
And then you'll be at a 12. And before you know it, once you've done it 100 times, your baseline, when you fall off the wagon, you're at a 75. You're so
Yep.
close to it because you only mess up. Let's say you only, if you have one treat out of the week, right? And then you've gone and had 3 or 4 in a week. Well, the next week, you're right back on track because you're not having a treat every single day, right?
Yep.
It's a matter of just compounding. Yes, I think just the small steps to build the confidence as well.
And so it goes into this fourth one, which is the fourth step is create accountability. So you've done this, you've done the work. And so create accountability. And so for me is when I went through the scenario, had the conversation, we moved on. And then I told this individual on the leadership team, I said, hey, look, hold me accountable moving forward. If I overstep, please send me an email, send me a text message, and let me know in a kind and loving way. And and she was okay with that, and she said, absolutely, because a lot of times people in my life, and you may have people, you listening to this in your life, that they're just sweeping things underneath the rug. They're not holding you accountable. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your team members, maybe it's your partner, maybe it's your friends. And so there's a lot of people in my life that they struggle with accountability themselves. So how are they going to hold me accountable? And you should want people in your life that are going to not always be yes people. Hey, you're doing a great job, little buddy. Keep going. Those people are important in your life, but you also want those accountability partners to level you up. The reason you're listening to this podcast and the reason you're wanting to be 1% better than you were yesterday, the only way to get there is growth. The only way to get there is accountability. And so make sure that whoever your best friend or partner, employees or team members, make sure they know that, and make sure you create that accountability, because when you fall off track It'll allow you to align to get back on your goal because your business partner, your friend, has the courage to hold you accountable and say something to you.
Yeah. Man, that also makes me think it's the same as your environment, right? Your accountability. It's like who you hang around with, you will end up becoming like them. And so it's almost its own form of accountability is when you're in that environment, you start creating an identity for yourself that, oh, this is how I do things. This is what I do. I see them doing it all the time. It's like words that
Mm,
we all say the word, hey, cool, or hey, good to see you, or have a nice day. We all say that because we all say that.
yeah.
And same thing, if you hang around people who eat salads and
Mm,
the grilled chicken and grilled salmon, and you will do the same thing. Like, have a nice day. Grab. I'll take a salad and the salmon, please. It's the same. It's the same thing because you're hanging around those people. Burger and fries. It's super weird when the other person gets a salad and grilled fish, and they got a burger and fries. It's almost like a jam in the brain. Like it's like awkward, right?
yeah.
Do you ever feel that? Like I was at my birthday and I decided to not get a dessert. Everyone else got dessert, and I'm like, did I make this awkward by me not eating a dessert? And it felt strange, you know. But if back in the day, it would have been everybody has it, and we're all cool, we're all good. And so I just realized the accountability is of your environment. It almost sets itself up to keep you on path. So, as well as having someone as an individual to keep you accountable as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really powerful one.
And guys, if you're liking the show, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you share this with another individual that wants to be 1% better than they were last week. This is how we're growing. And if you've liking the show so far, let us know what you like in the reviews on the positive feedback in which step is helping you and where you are in these steps. Number 5, focus on consistency, not perfection. This is a big one that's been a game changer for me, is reframing my mindset to building small, consistent habits rather than aiming for perfection. Sometimes strong personalities like myself, like we want everything to be perfect. We want it to be organized. We want it to be structured. We want it to be perfect. And it just drives us crazy. And so you may resonate with that. And if you do, we have to shift our mindset to building small, consistent habits in these action steps. And so for me, focusing on consistency and not perfection of just being 1%, not 100%, 1% better than I was yesterday, then it will allow me to get to where I want to go in my different areas of life: health, finances, relationships, you name it. How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah, with that, I often think about kind of like I said earlier, like if it's out of 100 and you're crushing it in that one thing you're after, and you get to a 90 and you're loving it for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later you're totally how am I not working out anymore? Why am I eating junk again? Why have I stopped the good things I was doing in that 2 weeks? Now that I'm wise enough, I've learned. I'm like, but I did. Even though I've fallen off the wagon, I did pick up that good little piece, that little nugget. I'm going to take that with me. So next time I get back into this kick, this back up to that 90, I'm on the right path, you know, and I'm going to fall back again. Well, at least I've still got that one little habit. And what did I pick up? That other little habit that I picked up on this next time. And before you know it, once you've done it 100 times, you've picked up 100 great little habits that are just embedded in you, and in that you can plant your flag in that, because that's confidence. You're like, I've been here before. I know I've fallen off the wagon. How fast can I get back to where I want to go? That to me, it's about time. We all know we're going to do it. We're all going to get sick and tired of being sick and tired of going the opposite direction of where we want to go, and
Yep.
so getting right back on track, and just again building that momentum. But yeah, it all goes hand in hand.
Number 6, action step, practice self-compassion. So you can do all these steps, but if you're not practicing self-compassion, giving yourself grace and actually loving yourself through the process, I don't know about you listening to this, but I tend to be very hard on myself. My father was very hard on me in my childhood, and that has transitioned into my adult in all areas of life. I'm very, very hard on myself. So me practicing self-compassion and giving myself grace, that in reminding myself that growth actually comes from learning and not punishing myself, I can show myself some grace. So for
Yeah.
instance, for me, like if I slip up, which I do all the time because I'm human, then I'll tell myself, hey, I'll do better tomorrow. Here's one thing I'm going to do differently tomorrow. And I'll set myself a reminder, and I'll tell that person to hold me accountable to it.
Yeah. Is there a specific time you can think of that was where you in the past would have beat yourself up? Like what words have you said recently to yourself that's, you know what, I wouldn't have said that to myself in the past. I was just self compassionate with myself. Can you think of one? Because this is a hard one for me. Everything you said, same thing. Like I'm very hard on myself, um, and so it's almost foreign ground where I'm like, take it easy on yourself. It's okay. Like what's the? Do you have an example for yourself?
Yeah, it is definitely foreign for sure. My recent interaction with the story that I shared earlier in the episode was with the individual on my leadership team yesterday. Normally in the past, I would have really subconsciously beat myself up, meaning I would have been like really hard on myself, and I would have really have allowed it to play on my mind, like, why did you talk? Why did you, was your tone correct? Did you say the right wordage?
Mm,
Did you show up, and were you the leader that you could have been? Could you have done better? And all these thoughts have gone through my, and I'm literally punishing myself
mm,
subconsciously. So what I've learned is by following these steps, I was able to take action and be intentional. My trigger words: be intentional, love, and kind on this phone call with her. Heart rate goes up a little bit, but I make sure that I'm aware of my tone and practicing this self-compassion. Like, hey, I'm struggling here. And that's where my compassion shows with this individual by me communicating to that individual, I'm struggling here because I feel like there's tension in between what's going on here in the last 24 hours. And 9 times out of 10, what happens is when you practice that self-compassion and when you share that with that other individual what you're struggling with versus internally punishing yourself, that other
mm.
person's like, oh, that's not no, I didn't, nothing was meant by it. I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Yes.
You're typically just punishing yourself.
You created your own prison.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I told my kids when we're playing sport or anything for that matter, if I say the words, "Oh, that was terrible," like if that was a terrible shot. "Oh, you idiot! Why'd you do that?" To
Mm,
myself, I only ever talked like that. I never talk like that to anybody else but myself. Why would I do that? So I told
yeah.
my kids, if you ever hear me say, "Hey, that's terrible," or I say call me out, and believe me, they call me out all the time. And so, but they're helping me recreate. I said, man, thanks for saying that. What I should have said was, man, I took my best shot. I missed. I need to next time. I need to just tweak the way I put my foot on the ball when we're playing soccer. And so the kids are also realizing that because I heard them. What got me started with that, my son, I heard him say, "Oh, that was a terrible shot," and I was like, I can't have him speaking to himself like that.
Mm,
So I've got to have him hold me accountable. And since I've stopped doing it, now he doesn't say those things. We talk positively to ourselves and have self compassion. It wasn't
yep.
and this is a very simple thing, but we do this all
Yep.
the time, right? Like, man, why did I speak to that person like that? You idiot! Why did you do that? Or you're a fool. Like, oh, I'm so stupid. The brain can't determine the difference between are you stupid, do you, because then it thinks that it is.
That's
It-
right.
when you say, "Oh, that was a terrible shot," your brain is saying you're terrible,
Yep.
right? And it cannot decipher the difference. So it seems like a minute, tiny little detail, but replacing that kind of thought process shows up huge in other areas over time.
Agreed. Action step number 7. We'll wrap things up here. We've got one more, so hang tight, which is the most important one, in my opinion. The number 7 is set short-term and realistic goals. So you can do all these action steps, but what is the short-term and realistic goals? And so break down the goals into manageable steps that you can achieve in these different areas of life. And so you're not overwhelmed, you're not overeating, and you're not, some examples that I have written down here. My wife, she earlier this year, she wanted to hit 750 miles in running, run 750 miles this year. And she has revisited that. She's got her journal. She's been documenting her mileage, and she uses a couple pieces of like Garmin app to track her running. And we had our coffee date this past Sunday right before church. And she always updates me on where she is in her mileage. I think by this Wednesday, she's going to hit 750 miles for the year, which was her
So
goal to hit by 12/31/2024. So she hit it 4 months in advance because she was able to break it down per month on what she wanted to hit. And she was able to hit it earlier by breaking those down. So an example that for me is I've leveled up my fitness in an intense training program. You know what training program I'm talking about, Ewan, and it's
Mm.
really intense. Like if you don't have it dialed in, you will fatigue, you will fold, and you will burn out. You will not, and it'll affect everything around you. So you have to have your sleep, your nutrition, your the time frame and recovery. You have to have everything's dialed in, and it's just leveled me up as a human being, because if you can have that strategic, intense focus on training and have that nailed down, where you're doing 2 a days and you're doing 3 on, which is 3 training days, and then 1 off, and then 2 on, and then 1 off. And it's taken me several months, if not years, to figure this out. I was able to break that down and figured out what works best for me. But just because it's not one size fits all, as far as the intense training program, I just broke it down into manageable. This is what works for me. This is what time I need to go work out. This is what time I need to eat. This is what time I need to work out in the afternoon time. And if I miss it by an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, I notice the difference. But by breaking these down into short-term manageable tasks, it's allowed me to really level up and put forth intense training. And then on the relationships and wealth, for me, like on wealth, like finances and building that, I know a lot of people come to me and they send me DMs and, team members and stuff like that. They're like, what do you do for investments? What do you do? Where do you put your different money and your different assets classes? And like, it's not one size fits all, but for me, it's like I have X amount in percentage of money that I allow to go to these different asset classes in that I want to invest in, that I believe in. And so I share that with them. And so whether that's $100 a month, whatever that short-term and realistic goal is for me, it's like we talked about earlier in the episode, it's going to pay huge dividends in 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, because you pick your head up and you go, all these small little disciplines and habits allow you to get to where you want to go. And so my final one, and then you can share yours, relationships. So one of the things that we've done here recently is, okay, how can I spend more time with my wife? How can we spend more deep quality time? And so we set a goal. We set a short-term, realistic goal, which is we're very productive, high-driven individuals. So getting to spend 30 minutes a day, good quality time, is very challenging for us because we're just so productive and busy, filling our mission and our passion and what it is that we love doing right now in this season of life. And so every day we spend 30 minutes together, and then every Sunday we play a game. We go to church together. But this has allowed us, by forward thinking, backwards planning, and planning these short-term realistic goals. And every week, no excuses, we're going to spend 30 minutes here, and then on a daily basis, we're going to do a date after this. So by being intentional about those and setting the realistic goals versus, hey, we're going to spend 6 hours together, you're going to, take off this week. It just doesn't work for us. And we used to be that. We're like, oh man, we're not spending enough time together. But now it's more of quality versus quantity. What's your thoughts on the short-term realistic goals?
Yeah, man, I would really, I'd almost say ditto to all those things in our own way. And to, I was thinking I could go into 7, but let's go ahead and say what the 8th thing is, because it really ties into 7. Because if
Yeah,
I start speaking about the little short-term goals, it's just going to lead right into 8. So for the grand
that's right.
finale, the most important thing that we said at the start, like if you were to get rid of all the other points that we talked about, the most important thing, and Sean, take it away on that. I'm going to jump in once you said
Yeah.
it.
Revisit your why. So that's the grand finale, is all these action steps. You can do all 7 action steps, but one of the things you're going to pick your head up and go, I'm doing the same thing over and over. I'm on a hamster wheel. I feel like I'm doing the same thing over, unless you revisit your why on these different areas of life: wealth, relationships, finances, spirituality, you name it. By revisiting your why and writing down why you started in the first place, and how your actions are aligning with your goals, right? And so for me, it's like fitness. I want to be fit because it makes me feel energized, confident, healthy, and
Mm.
optimal health is important to me. So by writing these down and revisiting these whys on a weekly basis, and every Sunday, I write down every area of life. And there's like 10 of them: finances, work, mission, spirituality. You keep naming them, right? And so each one of these areas of life, how did I show up as a business owner this week, or an entrepreneur, or a husband this week in these different areas of life? And so I'll rate myself from a scale of 1 to 10. So if it's mission driven, man, I was an 8 this week. I spent a lot of time focused on mission or spirituality. You know what? I didn't show up the way I wanted to show up. I'm going to put myself at a 6. There's some room for improvement. I need this coming week. I need to bump that up to a 7, bump my baseline up. Marriage. Where is that? Oh, that's, man, we had a great week. There was no bickering. There's no arguments. We filled each other's love tanks. We filled each other's love languages. I'm at an 8 this week. So by revisiting your why and why you're doing these on a daily basis allows you to align your actions with your goals and the outcomes and where you're headed.
Yeah, that's the nail right on the head right there. Because for me, when I was hearing you say the short-term goals, it could seem really intimidating. Like if I was to say, I'm training every day, multiple times a day, and if I didn't have the why behind it, it would just sound miserable.
Right.
And so I signed up for we both have signed up for the High Rocks in Dallas. So those short little term goals that I'm doing daily, well, why are you doing that? What's the purpose? Because if you just did that infinitely forever with no reason behind it, there's just burnout. There's no purpose. Like, why are you doing it? Because feeling good is an absolute why, but to tie into the short-term goals into your why, like leading up to Dallas High Rocks, that's a goal, short-term goal. It's only a few months away.
Yep.
But my daily goals align with that. And why do they all align with that? Because I want to perform well. I want to hit a certain time. I want to enjoy myself while I do it. And it's not all about that event, right? It all ties into, I want to live the best version of my life that I can. So it all ties in. And so, yeah, the why is so important to the short-term goals and everything else we talked about today. It all aligns. And no matter where you are at right now, if you are eating like junk, and if you are, you're not sleeping well, if you bicker with your wife or your husband, if you yell at your kids, you don't want to do any of those things, and yet you do them. If your spending is out of control, fear not, have hope, right? Today is another day where you can make a decision, micro decisions, right? Like, you're not going to get it all right. Me and Sean, we talk about all the time. Each week we discuss highs and lows. Well, there's these low points. It's happy. This is the journey, the cycle of life. And so whatever your direction you're going right now, know that you can turn it around. In 12 months' time, you will look in the mirror. Everything could be so different, so different. Keep coming back for more. Listen in. This is what we're working on, right? Be around people who are working on it too. And so come with us on the journey, and you will pick up the habits. We're picking up habits daily from the people we hang around with. So yeah, have hope. It's all good.
Yeah. And I'll end it with his falling off the wagon happens to everybody. What matters most to all of us is how we respond to it. When we've overeaten, when we've overspent, when there's been disagreements, like you said, with loved ones, to get back on track, the baby steps that we've went over today are, and write this down, acknowledge it, don't dwell on it, pause and reflect, make a micro course correction, create accountability, focus on consistency, not perfection, practice self-compassion, set short-term realistic goals, and revisit that why. And most importantly, level up and live your best life.
Level up and live, baby.